Here is a question I get all the time from people building with Claude Code. Should I use a hook or a skill for this? And the honest answer? Most people are guessing. They pick one, it half works, and they move on, never really sure if they made the right call. Today we are ending that guessing game. I am going to show you exactly what hooks and skills are, how they are fundamentally different, and give you a dead simple decision framework so you always know which one to reach for. Let's get into it. Before we go deep, here is the entire difference in one sentence. Hooks run automatically on lifecycle events, no matter what. Skills run when Claude decides they are relevant. That is it. That is the core distinction. Hooks are deterministic. They are triggered by events, not by Claude's judgment. Skills are probabilistic. Claude reads the situation and decides whether to call them. If you internalize that one idea, you will make the right choice 90% of the time. But let's make it concrete. A hook is a shell command you register against a lifecycle event in your settings.json file. When that event fires, Claude runs your command. Period. There is no negotiation. Claude does not decide whether to run it. It just runs. Here are the main lifecycle events you can hook into. Prompt submit fires every time you hit enter on a prompt. Pre-tool use fires before Claude uses any tool. Post-tool use fires after Claude finishes using a tool. Pre-commit fires before Claude makes a git commit. Your hook command gets context passed as environment variables, does its thing, and exits. Exit code 0 means all good, continue. Non-zero means stop. So if you wanted to block Claude from ever running rm-rf, you would write a pre-tool use hook that checks the command, and if it sees that pattern, exits with a non-zero code. Claude stops dead. Skills cannot do that. Claude can skip a skill. Claude cannot skip a hook. When should you use hooks? Use hooks when you need something to always happen, no exceptions. When you are enforcing a rule Claude should not be able to override. When you want automation that is completely deterministic. Or when you are doing things like auto-formatting files after edits, logging every tool use, blocking dangerous commands, running linters, or syncing outputs. Think of hooks as the guardrails and automation layer. They do not involve Claude's reasoning at all. They are pure event-driven execution. Skills are a completely different animal. A skill is a markdown file, usually called skill.md, that contains a set of instructions, a process, or a workflow. You load it into your Claude code setup, and Claude can call it when it decides the task requires it. The key phrase there is when it decides. Claude reads your request, reasons about what is needed, and if a skill matches, it uses it. Think of the skill file as the process documentation, and Claude as the person following it. What are skills good for? Skills shine when you have a repeatable workflow you want to encapsulate, like a deployment checklist, a debugging playbook, or a docs refresh process. They shine when you want Claude to query an external knowledge base or your own documentation. They shine when you need conditional logic. If this task requires image generation, use this skill. If not, skip it. And they shine when you want Claude to have access to specialized procedures without loading them into every single context. Here is a real example. Say you are building a solo SaaS, and every time you ship a feature, you want Claude to run tests, update the changelog, bump the version number, and post a Slack notification. You encode all of that as a skill. When Claude detects you are shipping something, it calls the skill. When you are just fixing a typo, it does not. That conditional invocation is exactly what you want. You are not wasting context loading a deployment workflow when you are just editing a comment. Because skills are loaded contextually, they are also more context efficient than hooks for complex workflows. You are not paying the context cost of the skill unless it is actually needed. The trade-off? Skills can be skipped. If Claude misjudges the situation, it might not call the skill when you expected it to. That is not a bug. It is by design. If you need guaranteed execution, that is a hook. Let me put this side by side so it really clicks. Hooks are triggered by lifecycle events. Skills are triggered by Claude's reasoning. Hooks always run. Skills do not. Claude decides. Hooks do not involve AI judgment. Skills do. Hooks are good for guardrails, automation, and enforcement. Skills are good for workflows, procedures, and knowledge. Hooks cannot be skipped. Skills can be skipped. Hooks have low context cost because they run outside the main reasoning context. Skills have higher context cost because they are loaded when invoked. Hooks live in settings.json. Skills live in a skill.md file. The mental model I use is simple. Hooks are the building's fire alarm. It goes off whether you want it to or not. Skills are the employee handbook. Claude reads it when the situation calls for it. You would not use a fire alarm to teach someone how to do their job. And you would not use the handbook to detect smoke. Here is the exact decision flow I use every time. Ask yourself, does this need to happen every single time, guaranteed? If yes, use a hook. If no, keep going. Does this require Claude to make a judgment call about when it is relevant? If yes, use a skill. If no, use a hook. Is this a complex workflow or procedure with multiple steps? If yes, use a skill. If no, use a hook. It is probably just a simple command. Do you need to enforce a rule Claude cannot override? If yes, use a hook. Always. Real examples. Run the linter after every file edit? Hook. It is always, no judgment needed. Block any shell command that deletes files? Hook. That is non-negotiable enforcement. Follow our deployment checklist when shipping? Skill. Claude decides when you are shipping. Query our internal docs when answering questions? Skill. Contextual and judgment-based. Log every tool used to a file? Hook. Deterministic, every time. Use our debugging process when something breaks? Skill. Claude recognizes the situation. The best Claude code setups use both, and they complement each other naturally. Here is a practical production example. You are building a web app. Your setup has a hook on post tool use that auto-formats any file Claude edits. A hook on pre-commit that runs your test suite before every commit. A skill for your full deployment workflow. And a skill that queries your internal component library when Claude is building UI. The hooks handle the mechanical, always-on stuff. The skills handle the intelligent, contextual stuff. Neither one is trying to do the other's job. One more tip, put your stable, non-negotiable project rules in Claude.md. That is different from both hooks and skills. Claude.md is always loaded into context. Skills are loaded on demand. Hooks run on events. Each layer has its job. So to recap. Hooks are deterministic, event-driven, always run, and do not use AI judgment. Skills are contextual, AI-driven, called when relevant, and skippable. When you need enforcement and automation, hook it. When you need intelligent, reusable workflows, skill it. If this helped you, smash that like button and subscribe. I have more Claude code deep dives coming. Drop a comment below with what you are building and what your first hook or skill is going to be. See you in the next one.